My aunt called my granddad's farm worthless land, but Monday's soil test changed everything. The words still echoed in my mind, sharp and biting, like the wind that swept across the rolling hills of Granddad's farm. It was a late summer afternoon when Aunt Clara had stood at the edge of the property, her arms crossed tightly over her chest as if to shield herself from some invisible chill. She'd looked out at the fields with disdain etched into every line of her face, shaking her head slowly before pronouncing her verdict: "This place is worthless land." The phrase hung there, heavy and suffocating, long after she turned on her heel and walked away. I remember how Granddad didn't say anything right away. He just stood beside me, leaning heavily on his cane, staring out at the acres we both knew so well. His weathered hands gripped the wood tightly, knuckles white against the grain. I could see the tension in his shoulders, but also something else, a quiet defiance, maybe even sadness. He'd spent decades working this soil, nurturing it through droughts and floods, planting seeds with calloused fingers and watching them grow under an unforgiving sun. To hear someone dismiss all of that with such casual cruelty must have cut deeper than any plowshare ever could. But what did Aunt Clara know? She lived in the city now, far removed from the rhythms of rural life. Her world revolved around board meetings and business deals, not sunrise chores or harvest moons. Still, her words stung because they weren't entirely new. I'd heard whispers of doubt for years, neighbors speculating about whether the old man should sell off parcels here and there, cousins suggesting he'd be better off investing in something more modern. Even Mom sometimes hinted that holding on to the farm might not make sense anymore. Yet none of them understood what this land meant, not really. For Granddad, it wasn't just dirt beneath his boots, it was history, legacy, identity. Every furrow told a story, every tree bore witness to moments past. And for me? Well, I suppose I inherited some of his stubbornness. Though I'd left for college and built a life miles away, part of me always felt tethered to these fields. They were where I learned patience, resilience, and the value of hard work. They were home. That's why I came back last weekend, ostensibly to help Granddad prepare for winter. But deep down, I think I wanted to prove something, to myself, to Aunt Clara, to everyone who doubted him. Maybe I needed to remind myself why this place mattered too. So when Granddad mentioned casually over breakfast that he'd arranged for a soil test on Monday, I perked up immediately. A soil test? I asked, spooning oatmeal into my mouth. Why now? He shrugged, though there was a glimmer in his eye. Figured it was time, he said simply. Never hurts to know what you're working with. I nodded, trying to mask my curiosity. Was this his way of fighting back against Aunt Clara's judgment? Or was he genuinely curious about the state of things? Either way, I decided then and there that I would stay until the results came in. Something about the timing felt significant, like fate had conspired to give us one last chance to prove the skeptics wrong. Monday arrived sooner than expected, bringing with it a crisp autumn breeze and skies painted in hues of gold and crimson. The technician pulled up in a dusty truck shortly after sunrise, clipboard in hand and boots caked with mud from other farms. He introduced himself as Mr. Grayson, his voice gravelly but warm. After exchanging pleasantries, he got straight to work, driving stakes into the ground and collecting samples from various spots across the property. Granddad watched intently, occasionally offering commentary or asking questions. I lingered nearby, feeling oddly nervous despite telling myself it was just routine. By mid-morning, Mr. Grayson packed up his equipment and promised to send the results by Friday. As he drove away, leaving tire tracks in the soft earth, Granddad turned to me with a wry smile. "Guess we'll see soon enough," he said. The wait was agonizing. Each day stretched longer than the last, filled with restless nights and endless speculation. What if the soil was depleted? What if Aunt Clara was right, and all our efforts amounted to nothing? These thoughts gnawed at me, no matter how hard I tried to push them aside. Meanwhile, Granddad seemed unusually calm, almost serene. He went about his usual tasks, feeding livestock, repairing fences, tending to the garden, as if nothing hung in the balance. Watching him, I couldn't help but wonder if he already knew something I didn't. Finally, Friday rolled around. By noon, I was pacing the kitchen floor, glancing at the clock every few minutes. Granddad sat at the table, sipping coffee and reading the paper as though he hadn't a care in the world. Just as I opened my mouth to suggest calling Mr. Grayson for an update, the phone rang. It was him. "Mr. Thompson?" Mr. Grayson's voice crackled through the receiver. "I've got your results." Granddad motioned for me to sit down before taking the call. I obeyed, heart pounding wildly in my chest. He listened silently for several minutes, nodding occasionally and jotting notes on a scrap of paper. When he finally hung up, he leaned back in his chair, a slow grin spreading across his face. "Well," I blurted out, unable to contain myself any longer. He chuckled softly, setting down his pen. "You won't believe this," he began, his eyes twinkling with mischief. "Turns out, our worthless land isn't so worthless after all." I stared at him, uncomprehending. "What do you mean?" "The soil," he paused dramatically, clearly enjoying the suspense. "It's some of the richest, most fertile dirt Mr. Grayson's ever tested. High in organic matter, perfect pH levels, excellent drainage, you name it. According to him, we could grow just about anything out there." For a moment, I thought I'd misheard. "Are you serious?" "As a heart attack," he replied, laughing now. "He said it's practically prime real estate for crops. Even mentioned something about rare minerals that could boost yields." I slumped back in my chair, overwhelmed by a rush of emotions I couldn't quite untangle. Relief, pride, vindication, they swirled together like leaves caught in a whirlwind. All those years of hearing people dismiss this place, only to discover it was hiding a treasure beneath its surface. It felt surreal, almost too good to be true. And yet, as I looked around the room, the worn furniture, the faded curtains, the photographs lining the walls, I realized something else. This revelation didn't change everything overnight. Sure, the soil was valuable, but the true worth of this farm had never been measured in dollars or yields. It was in the memories embedded in every corner, the lessons whispered by the wind, the bond between generations forged through sweat and sacrifice. Still, news like this couldn't stay secret for long. Word spread quickly among family and neighbors, sparking a mix of reactions. Some were thrilled, congratulating Granddad on his unexpected fortune. Others remained skeptical, questioning the accuracy of the test or wondering aloud if it was too good to last. Aunt Clara, predictably, was less enthusiastic. When she called later that evening, her tone was clipped and dismissive. "So I hear you've struck gold," she said dryly. "Congratulations." "It's not about money," Granddad replied evenly, though I could hear the strain in his voice. "It's about proving that this land has potential. That it always did." Aunt Clara sighed audibly. "Potential doesn't pay bills, Dad. You know that." "Maybe not," he conceded. "But it gives us hope. Isn't that worth something?" She didn't answer, and the silence that followed was deafening. Eventually, she muttered something about needing to go and hung up without another word. I glanced at Granddad, expecting to see frustration or disappointment, but instead found determination burning brightly in his eyes. "We'll show her," he said firmly. "We'll show them all." Over the next few weeks, plans began to take shape. With Mr. Grayson's guidance, we started experimenting with different crops, testing which ones thrived best in our newly appreciated soil. Wheat, barley, kale, it seemed like everything we planted grew faster and stronger than expected. Neighbors stopped by frequently, eager to see the transformation firsthand. Some offered advice, others expressed envy, but most simply marveled at the turnaround. Despite the progress, challenges remained. Weather patterns shifted unpredictably, forcing us to adapt constantly. Equipment broke down, requiring costly repairs. And then there was the lingering skepticism, from Aunt Clara, yes, but also from within ourselves. Could we really sustain this momentum? Or would reality eventually catch up with us? Through it all, Granddad remained steadfast, his faith in the land unwavering. He worked tirelessly, often long past sunset, driven by a purpose I couldn't fully understand but deeply admired. There were days when exhaustion threatened to overwhelm him, when the weight of responsibility pressed down like storm clouds overhead. Yet he persevered, drawing strength from some reservoir I suspected ran deeper than mere optimism. As autumn gave way to winter, the farm transformed once again. Fields lay dormant beneath blankets of snow, their promise hidden but not forgotten. Inside the house, fires crackled in the hearth, casting flickering shadows on the walls. Conversations turned reflective, filled with talk of seasons past and dreams for the future. Granddad spoke often of sustainability, of leaving the land better than he found it. He encouraged me to think creatively, to consider ways we might share its bounty with others. One particularly cold evening, As we sat together sipping hot cocoa, he posed a question that caught me off guard. "What do you want for this place, kiddo?" he asked, his gaze steady and searching. "Not what I want, or what anyone else thinks. Just you." I hesitated, taken aback by the sudden shift in focus. Truthfully, I hadn't allowed myself to imagine much beyond survival. Keeping the farm afloat felt daunting enough without adding grand ambitions to the mix. But as I sat there, surrounded by the warmth of familiarity and possibility, I realized I did have ideas, small ones at first, tentative and fragile, but growing stronger with each passing moment. "I want it to be a place people can come to," I said finally, choosing my words carefully. "Not just to buy produce or admire the view, but to connect. To learn. Maybe even heal." Granddad nodded thoughtfully, a faint smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "That's a fine dream," he murmured. "And I reckon it's one worth chasing." His approval meant more than I could put into words. For the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of clarity, of belonging. This wasn't just Granddad's farm anymore, it was ours. Together, we carried its legacy forward, shaping it into something neither of us could have envisioned alone. Spring arrived with a vengeance, bursting forth in explosions of green and gold. The air buzzed with activity as we prepared for another planting season, armed with knowledge and renewed confidence. Visitors trickled in steadily, drawn by curiosity or word of mouth. Some stayed briefly, snapping photos and marveling at the lushness. Others lingered longer, volunteering their labor or seeking guidance on sustainable practices. Slowly but surely, the farm became more than just a plot of land. It evolved into a hub of community and collaboration. Aunt Clara visited once during this period, though reluctantly. She arrived unannounced on a drizzly afternoon, her sleek car looking out of place amidst the tractors and wagons. I greeted her cautiously, unsure of what to expect. To my surprise, she seemed subdued, almost hesitant, as she stepped out and surveyed the scene. Gone was the sharp-edged criticism, in its place lingered a quiet uncertainty. "This place looks different," she admitted after a while, her voice softer than I'd ever heard it. "Better." Granddad joined us then, wiping his hands on a rag as he approached. "Glad you noticed," he said lightly, though there was steel beneath his tone. "Took a lot of work to get here." Clara nodded, averting her gaze. "I can see that." She paused, chewing her lip thoughtfully. "Look, I didn't mean to." "No need to apologize," Granddad interrupted gently. "Just glad you're here now." They shared a look then, brief but charged with unspoken understanding. Whatever rift had formed between them began to mend, however tentatively. Clara stayed for dinner that night, joining us at the table and listening intently as we discussed plans for expansion and outreach. By the time she left, her demeanor had softened noticeably, replaced by something resembling respect, or perhaps admiration. As the months unfolded, the farm continued to flourish, defying expectations at every turn. Challenges persisted, of course, but they no longer felt insurmountable. With each hurdle overcome, our resolve strengthened, bolstered by the knowledge that we weren't alone in this endeavor. Friends, neighbors, strangers, all contributed in their own ways, weaving a tapestry of support that bound us closer than ever. Yet even amid the triumphs, questions lingered. What lay ahead for this place? How far could we push its limits without losing sight of its essence? And most importantly, how could we ensure that its legacy endured, not just for us but for those who would follow? These uncertainties weighed heavily on my mind as I stood atop the hill overlooking the fields one crisp morning. The sun rose steadily, casting golden light across the landscape below. Dew clung to blades of grass, shimmering like tiny jewels. Somewhere in the distance, a tractor rumbled to life, its engine a comforting hum against the backdrop of birdsong. Behind me, footsteps crunched softly on gravel. Turning, I saw Granddad approaching, his silhouette framed by the burgeoning dawn. He moved slower these days, his gait marked by the wear of countless seasons. Yet his spirit remained undiminished, fierce and indomitable. "Thinking big thoughts?" he asked, coming to stand beside me. I smiled faintly, gesturing toward the horizon. "Just wondering what comes next." He followed my gaze, his expression thoughtful. "We'll figure it out," he said simply. "One step at a time." And somehow, standing there with him, I believed it. The days stretched into weeks, and the rhythm of life on the farm settled into a comforting cadence. Each morning began with the soft glow of sunrise painting the fields in hues of amber and rose, followed by the hum of activity as we tended to crops, repaired fences, or welcomed visitors who had come to see what everyone was talking about. It felt like the farm had become a living, breathing entity, responding to our care with bountiful harvests and vibrant growth. But there was still that nagging question at the back of my mind: what comes next? Granddad's reassurance, one step at a time, was comforting, but it didn't quell the restless energy building inside me. I wanted more than just survival, I wanted transformation. I wanted this place to mean something beyond its fertile soil and picturesque views. And so, late one evening, after dinner plates were cleared and the house grew quiet, I decided to voice my thoughts. "Granddad," I started hesitantly, sitting across from him at the kitchen table where he nursed a cup of tea, "what if we did something bigger?" He raised an eyebrow, intrigued but cautious. "Bigger how?" I leaned forward, my hands clasped tightly together. "What if we turned this farm into more than just a working property? What if we made it a place for education? A sanctuary for people to reconnect with nature, learn sustainable farming practices, maybe even heal from whatever they're carrying around?" His expression softened, though his eyes sparkled with curiosity. "You've been thinking about this for a while, haven't you?" I nodded, feeling both vulnerable and exhilarated. "Yeah. Ever since Aunt Clara visited and saw how much has changed here, it got me thinking. This land has already proven itself resilient. Why not use it to help others do the same?" For a long moment, he didn't respond. Instead, he stared out the window, his gaze distant but focused, as if piecing together fragments of a puzzle only he could see. Finally, he turned back to me, his voice steady and deliberate. "It's a bold idea," he said, setting down his teacup. "And not without risks. But bold ideas are often the ones worth chasing." Relief washed over me, though his words carried weight. Risks, that was the part one hadn't fully grappled with yet. Turning the farm into a community hub would require resources we didn't have, partnerships we'd need to build, and sacrifices neither of us might be prepared for. Yet, as daunting as it sounded, the vision refused to fade. If anything, it grew brighter, fueled by the memory of all the times this land had defied expectations, including our own. The first step was research. Over the next few weeks, I spent hours poring over articles, case studies, and grant applications, trying to understand what it would take to bring this dream to life. I reached out to local agricultural organizations, environmental groups, and educational institutions, seeking advice and support. Some responses were lukewarm, others dismissive, but a handful were encouraging enough to keep me going. One name kept coming up in conversations: Dr. Elena Martinez, a professor of sustainable agriculture at a nearby university. Known for her work in regenerative farming and community engagement, she seemed like the perfect person to consult. With some trepidation, I sent her an email outlining our plans and asking if she'd be willing to visit the farm. To my surprise, she replied within days, expressing genuine interest. "Your project sounds inspiring," she wrote. "Let's talk more when I come for a visit next month." When Dr. Martinez arrived, she brought with her an air of calm authority that instantly put everyone at ease. She walked the fields with us, notebook in hand, asking thoughtful questions and offering insights that left me scribbling furiously to keep up. By the end of the day, she pulled me aside, her expression serious but kind. "This is a remarkable opportunity," she said, gesturing toward the expanse of green stretching before us. "But it won't be easy. You'll need funding, volunteers, and a clear plan for sustainability, not just environmentally, but financially and socially too." "I know," I admitted, feeling the weight of her words settle heavily on my shoulders. "It feels overwhelming sometimes." She smiled gently. "Every great endeavor does. The key is to start small and let the momentum carry you forward. Build relationships, create programs that address real needs, and trust that the right people will find you." Her advice resonated deeply, giving me a sense of direction I hadn't felt before. As we parted ways, she promised to connect us with potential partners and resources, leaving me with a renewed determination to make this vision a reality. With Dr. Martinez's guidance, we began laying the groundwork for what we tentatively called the Green Horizon Initiative. The name came to me during another sleepless night, inspired by the endless possibilities stretching before us like the horizon itself. We envisioned workshops on organic gardening, classes on composting and water conservation, and seasonal events celebrating the cycles of nature. Most importantly, we hope to create a space where anyone, regardless of background or experience, could feel welcome and empowered to learn. Word spread quickly, thanks in part to social media posts and flyers distributed throughout town. Volunteers began trickling in, drawn by the promise of meaningful work and connection. Some were students eager to gain hands-on experience, others were retirees looking for purpose. A few were individuals simply searching for solace, their stories etched into their faces and carried in their quiet determination. Among them was Mia, a young woman whose presence soon became a cornerstone of the initiative. She arrived one rainy afternoon, drenched and shivering, clutching a backpack filled with notebooks and sketches. Her introduction was brief but memorable. "I heard you're doing cool stuff here. Can I help?" It turned out Mia had recently left a high-pressure job in the city, disillusioned and burned out. She'd always dreamed of working with plants, but never believed she could make it happen. Seeing her enthusiasm rekindled something in me, a reminder of why we were doing this in the first place. "You can definitely help," I told her, handing her a pair of gloves. "Welcome to the team." As the months passed, Mia proved invaluable, bringing creativity and passion to every task. Together, we designed garden layouts, planned workshops, and brainstormed ways to engage the community. Slowly but surely, the farm transformed into a vibrant tapestry of collaboration and shared purpose. Despite the progress, challenges loomed large. Funding remained a constant struggle, forcing us to get creative with fundraising efforts. We hosted farm-to-table dinners under the stars, auctioned off produce baskets, and even organized a music festival featuring local bands. Each event brought in modest amounts, but they also strengthened bonds within the community, reminding us that success wasn't measured solely in dollars. Then there were the skeptics, those who doubted whether such an ambitious project could succeed in a rural area like ours. Aunt Clara, though softer in her criticism now, still voiced concerns about practicality. "You're putting a lot of faith in goodwill," she said during one of her rare visits. "Not everyone shares your optimism." "I know," I replied, meeting her gaze. "But isn't it worth trying anyway?" She studied me for a long moment before nodding slowly. "Maybe you're right. Just, be careful, okay?" Her caution lingered, a reminder of the stakes involved. Yet it also reinforced my resolve. This wasn't just about proving Aunt Clara wrong anymore. It was about proving to ourselves, and to anyone who dared to dream alongside us, that change was possible, no matter how improbable it seemed. As autumn approached once again, the farm stood as a testament to resilience and reinvention. Fields brimmed with life, gardens overflowed with color, and laughter echoed through the air. Visitors streamed in daily, drawn by the promise of discovery and connection. In many ways, it felt like we'd already achieved the impossible. But deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. There were still dreams to chase, lessons to learn, and lives to touch. Standing atop the hill overlooking the thriving landscape below, I realized something profound. The true value of this land wasn't in its soil or its crops. It was in the stories it held, the hearts it touched, and the futures it helped shape. Turning to Granddad, who stood beside me watching the sunset paint the sky in fiery hues, I smiled. "We're just getting started, aren't we?" He chuckled, his eyes twinkling with pride. "Absolutely. And I wouldn't have it any other way." Together, we faced the horizon, ready to embrace whatever lay ahead.